I am so honored, so honored, not just to be talking with y'all, but to really just call you guys my friends. And I'm a big believer in order to better yourself, you have to surround yourself that are better than you. And you three are amongst the top for me. And I know that we don't have as much time as we would like for this conversation to go. So we're just gonna start it off, right? So when companies talk about bringing your best self to work, what does that mean for Black folks in corporate? And I'll just leave it up to you three to talk.
Wow. No primer.
Anybody?
No softball?
No softballs, man. We going.
I don't think it's fully honest. I think it means for some folks. I think we're expected to comport ourselves in a certain way that's acceptable to the majority. So I think when people say bring your full self to work, there's an and and an if, and if we like this. But I don't think the true meaning of it is truly felt for Black folks when we show up. We have to show up a certain way to get ahead and to be accepted and to advance the way we'd like to. So I think it's a half truth.
I hear this question all the time, especially from our young folk about wanting to bring their whole selves to work. And I always just talk them through, the versions of yourself that you even share with your family. Like, there's a different way you act when you at grandma's church than you would at the club with your friends, than you would at so this is nothing new, this idea of compartmentalization or code switching. We code switch in and among ourselves. So I say, when you think about bringing your whole self to work, bring as much as you can of your brilliance, your talents, your gifts. But I don't know any space where you can bring it all, right? Like, grandma doesn't want to see you twerking. And then also, you're probably not going to bring the Bible to the club, right? So no context. That's what I say for folks. No context. Context is really important. But to your point, Bernard, I do think there's an additional layer of expectation for us to fit into some biases, misconceptions about who we are that we are greeted with at the door of many of our organizations. Now because grandma is all loving and all forgiving and will pray for you and got her arms open wide. I don't think that is the same analogy when it comes to our organizations in corporate America.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to add to that, Kamau?
I think it's been summarized well. If the question was whether you bring your full selves or your best selves to work, it's not like you said your best self, but I think in that, the last point, Rachel, that you were making is important. That I think the room for error for us is really, really small. So the best self that you have is the only self that you can present, because the expectations of us with ourselves and our ability to perform is met with kind of incessant second guessing of our intellect, of our ability to perform, of our judgment, of our presentation. We're not given the benefit of the doubt. So to that extent, I think the relationship with professional excellence and not having to do kind of pristine work at all times, firing on all cylinders all the time, those expectations, I think, are a bit higher for us. That's true in the academy as it is in a professional setting. Yeah. So to that extent, I think the best self is the only self. And then to the point that Rachel and Bernard were just making, I agree. We don't bring nobody brings your whole self anywhere, anytime. So that expectation to me just doesn't make sense.
Agreed. But there's other parts to that, right? I mean, there's other parts to that. Oftentimes, when we talk about our best selves, when we talk about, being excellent in our roles, sometimes that just isn't enough. There's other expectations that go along with that as well, especially if you want to develop in your career. We've all experienced it, right? I mean, we go into situations where we know that we're qualified, but we've also been, walking into a room and they make assumptions about us based on the way that we look. Can we talk about that a little bit? Some of that, internal superiority stuff that happens to us. All right, I'm gonna start pointing fingers.
Well, here, let me add to that. So just to start us off, so I'm gonna start pointing. I think that the narrative part of that. For example, I used to be a program officer at the National Science Foundation, and we had a whole body of work focused on expanding computing opportunities for Black and Hispanic communities, etc. But the way that the solicitations are written, those are the articles that we offer to the academic community to submit proposals. The whole paragraph says that all the adjectives basically associated with Black and brown people are underrepresented, marginalized, at risk, insufficient, what have you. So when people encounter us, it's clear that that narrative people have been indoctrinated, that we're coming in as broken people and we're already in a hole, that deficit idea that we bandy around so much. So that our excellence is really just trying to get us up to their level of expectations of just being mediocre, because they have already processed that we're not quite capable and on par with them.
Yes.
Which brings me back to the original point that our best self is our excellent self, the only self we can really broker with.
Yeah.
Bernard.
Yeah, that's a hard. I mean, like, to that point where like those terms, minority, you're small. Like, I hate the word minority and underrepresented. Like, I know, I wish people would just call it what it is instead of kind of dancing around it, because it is. Those are all loaded terms, and I think it's like death by 1,000 cuts when you think about, if we keep hearing that over and over again. I know we're excellent. I know we're great, but this just isn't helpful. The word choices, the word usage, and the inferences that you make it gets. Now that I'm getting older, it's just become offensive at every turn. It's like, really? Still, are we there? And so you just want to be called what it is and be more honest about and be more proximate with your words and precise with your words, as opposed to the kind of sliding us over and over again.
Yeah, I when you talk about the stereotypes, I think that's a little bit, or the priming that people have. I'm often met with the angry Black woman. I love that one. And sometimes I am angry, and sometimes, or the loud Black woman, or sometimes I am loud. I remember at one organization, there was, I was having a discussion with a C-level executive, say it that way, very broad, about our product and marketing our product, right? So just for you folks, chief diversity officers are not just HR people. We are actually business people. I do have a business mind and strategy for all of it. And so she and I were having a chat about that. And it was related to talent and what we were going to bring in. And she was frustrated about some things. Anyway, the story that got told, the narrative that got told when we left the room, which we were in the room with other people, is that I was yelling at her. And of course, a few folks believed, because they've been primed to believe, that women who look like me are angry and loud and will do that in the workplace. What they don't understand is that, just like my sorority sister, Kamala Harris, I use great restraint in most situations so that I am the exact opposite of what people think and expect. So I knew for a fact I had not yelled. I was like, honey, had I yelled at you, like, you would have known. There would have been no question. You would have been crying. People would have heard. Like, there would have been an aftermath of sorts. So, no. And thankfully, my boss, the chief people officer at the time, knew that that wasn't the case. But it was just interesting that that was the narrative that she went with immediately. That yelling.
Yeah. And I hated this knowledge in the back of your mind. Like, I'm fairly tall, and I think about like the space I'm taking up, and I'm constantly thinking about how I'm showing up. Is this going to adversely impact what I'm trying to get done based on someone else's fear? It's like their fear is now my problem, which is incredibly unfair. But this is the water that I swim in, and so I think about these tropes and these narratives that aren't true, and it's just really upsetting. Like, you want to. I mean, I'm generally here all the time, but. I mean, I always am, but still, the point is, like, I shouldn't have to worry about that's your problem. Fear is your problem. My dad always says, that fear is your problem, but now they're putting it on me with, whatever notions are in their head.
Well, that kind of goes back to, you know, what we were talking about at the very beginning, right? Because we do have to watch ourselves in those environments. I mean, when we talk about having our private conversations, the way that I really try hard to talk the same way and to try and behave the same way, regardless of what I'm doing, because I think that my work should be good enough. And obviously those things sometimes bite you in the butt. But what we're getting back to again is, you know, that code switching a little bit too, because that's a part of it, because we know that certain folks in that room will have certain ideas about us, about angry Black women, and I'm totally okay with a person being angry. Sometimes that is justified, especially Black women, more than justified. I'd be mad as hell. Honestly, I wouldn't control myself at all. But there's this beauty about us, and there's this creativity about us, right? This creative capital that oftentimes companies are going to lose out on, because there are so many of us pulling back and compartmentalizing and doing those things. Can you guys want to speak on that at all? Like, what's your thoughts around that?
I think it's a collective loss. I mean, there's so many people who are so brilliant and they're holding back. Like, you know, like I think about, like, you know, like a car has a limiter that won't let you go over a certain speed, but imagine you could take that off and go as fast as you wanted to go.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's exhausting. Right.
It's exhausting.
I think about my brain, you know, 100% capacity, and how much of it I have to spend kind of really processing everyone's demeanor, what they probably have been told and think about me, like, and making sure I show up in a way that is compelling and effective, yet non-threatening. Like, it is an extra layer of work that I don't think the overrepresented population has to deal with. So they are able to bring more of their best selves and full selves to work, because they are not constantly thinking about the cultural aspects that we are constantly having to think about.
I agree with that for sure. I think if you think about the number of people who are involved in the kind of work we're involved in, and you know, kind of the boundlessness of the talents that we have, in some ways, if you think about the opportunity cost to people who are dealing with trying to right inequitable wrongs where they could be doing other things,
right?
It's a tremendous loss. And in some cases, I mean, thinking about it as a personal matter, my interests, I mean, I studied engineering and so on, and the work that I do is relevant to that. But thinking about what I could be doing otherwise, rather than having to fight this fight, is, I mean, it's meaningful to me and purposeful, don't get me wrong at all. But if you think about the whole cadre of all of us who have basically the best of the American education possible to be doing other things, is an enormous opportunity cost. But then I also wanted to raise, again, this point that Bernard just put out about having to navigate in the space as a brother, being tall and big and what have you. I think it's important there to make the parallel. Like, what we're responding to in the corporate setting may be, you know, HR calling to say Rachel is yelling at them or what have you. But what that is, it's the institution's reaction to Black people. And in the corporate setting, it manifests itself in lack of promotion, length of tenure, last to be hired, first to be fired, HR complaints, all of that. But in the police, it results in you being shot. But the common denominator is the same institutional attitude to Black people, which comes back to the point that I was making at the beginning. The opportunity cost here is extraordinary, not just to us, but I think to kind of the body politic writ large.
But shouldn't the unconscious bias trainings take care of all that? Shouldn't we be past that by now?
Well, you have the little survey at the end, don't you? Just everybody take it and we straight.
That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying, right? Shouldn't the unconscious bias trainings that are happening right now I told you, let's go. Like, shouldn't that have taken care of it? Shouldn't they know us by now? Like, should Bernard really have to worry about how other people perceive him? I mean, he's a brilliant man. You know, why does he have to worry about the space that he takes up? You know, why does Miss Rachel have to be worried about somebody thinking that she's angry? You know, all this stuff,
Well,
right? I mean, things that we've talked about, like, talk to me.
Yeah. You know, first of all, I mean, I know you're being cheeky. We all know now, after millions of dollars have been spent, millions of man hours and woman hours and people hours have been spent on unconscious bias training, that it doesn't do what we thought it would do. We knew that. You know, actually now I'm so glad the last few months, well, let me say, the last few months have provided an opportunity for us to open up the conversation about things like white supremacy. We can say racism and anti-racism, and we can have an open discussion. And I think that ultimately is what's going to move us forward, is having those really uncomfortable, tough discussion. But we needed a shared language around it. We needed a kind of a foundational shared understanding, which I don't think we've had. And for me, what's been really eye-opening is the lack of education, particularly in the US, I can't speak globally, but about how we got here. You know, when I read a report about a month ago, that 75% of adult Americans don't understand or know about the Holocaust, it's troubling, because, you know, the Holocaust was a major event. So that leads me down the road of, well, then how many people know about the US Holocaust, the US, you know, chattel segregation, racism, and slavery that happened? Like, I would say that number is probably a little lower. So we have a ton of education to do, I think, around that. And that's where I think our dollars and money should be spent, on how we got here. I've been studying Thomas Jefferson. I've been studying the Constitution. I've been studying House of Burgess, and all of the slave codes and the Virginia codes and all the laws that set this up. That's some eye-opening information to have.
Well, it gives us a foundation to understand where we are now,
Yeah.
right? It gives us a foundation to understand where we are now. And the sad part is that I know many people found out about Tulsa through The Watchmen, and that tripped me out. That tripped me out. Not just white folks, though. It was black folks, too.
Yeah, all of us.
So that speaks a lot to our education system. But if these anti-bias trainings are not working, and one of the things that I want people to walk away with and be able to go back to their companies with is, you know, real ideas about things that could work. How do we handle this then? How do we go about, you know, doing this better? Come on, I'll leave that one to you for first.
Well, I think that the context matters. I think the unbiased training is limited in its efficacy, in part because we're essentially a totally segregated society. So I live in Atlanta. I've said this innumerable times. Atlanta is one of the most segregated places in America. And so if I were white and I had the same educational path that I currently have, I went to Berkeley and then I went to Georgia Tech and I did all these fancy things. I could do that, have a white wife, white kids, live in a white neighborhood, and I just never have to deal with black people at all. And then you come and put me into this workspace and you're telling me to do this highly sophisticated psychosocial thing about inclusion and belonging that I don't do in my life. So you're asking me to do in a professional setting something I've never experienced and I don't experience personally. So the intellectual burden that you're putting on me is extraordinary. One. Two, I don't know that I have a particular reason. Like, you're telling me that diversity matters and that my success is incumbent upon this diversity thing, but I'm already successful. So, and I work at $1 trillion company. So what are you telling me? Why do I have to go have black friends? I just don't get it.
Right.
So there's that. So I think in the context of what to do, and I'm not trying to be overly cynical there, I'm just laying out what I see is the reality of the incentive structure. So I think rather than just kind of artificially train me to be unbiased, because first I'm going to be defensive and say that I'm not biased. So I'm not even really receptive to what you're telling me. So rather than do that, perhaps the education shouldn't be on accepting your differences, but rather learning about the place. Like Rachel was saying, we need to learn about this place. We don't know enough about the history of it. And if President Trump, for example, goes down the road with this Patriot 1776 Education Act, he's going to strip out all of that other things too. So to me, the educational infrastructure that we need is that. such that we actually learn about the way that the country was formed and the way that we currently manifest in it.
Yeah. Everybody read, hate.
I mean, like to Rachel's point about being a student of history, you know, I think putting my political hat on, you know, you got to go, what's in it for me? A lot of times folks in an individualistic society that we live in, they have to see the benefit. It needs to be presented in a way and what's in it for me, because I can't want it more than you want it, unfortunately. And I think, you know, because there is selective and collective ignorance that's going on in terms of people, like they have all the tools, we have the internet, you can Google anything.
We carry around research tools. When I tell high school students that, when I talk to them all the time, they're like, "What I do?" I'm like, "Your phone. It's not just games."
So there's no excuse other than how can I motivate you to care? How can I motivate you to try to search these things out? Because once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
So I do think it's just like I personally, this is my this thing I care about. But I wish we could actually go and mandate from a federal level a core curriculum for all schools where you can't say, like, you know, I remember after I got off the Hillary campaign, a certain state, Texas, decided to eliminate Hillary Clinton and Helen Keller for whatever reason. You're like, how did you even decide on that? And states have a lot of sway in terms of what they put in books, and you can write history in a way that is absolutely inaccurate. And if we all are citizens, we all pay money towards public schools, we should have some say in terms of what's being taught instead of lies, or you know, untruths or whatever you want to call it. But
lies. But what you're talking about is a long tail plan, and I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100% that it needs to start with our educational system. But I'm talking about, like, well, let's talk about like more junior, younger brothers and sisters that are in the workforce now, going through all the stuff that we've gone through that we really would not wish on anybody, right? Like, how do they get affected? How do we help them?
I think, just real quick, before you leave that bigger thing, I think that is a direction that corporations can now take. That the influence in the political sphere and the policy sector related to education, especially as cities are courting the presence of these companies for the tax incentives and for the general trickle-down effects of having big tech companies sit in their municipalities, we have to exert more influence and demands on what we want that educational structure to be for our long-term workforce, the well-being of their long-term workforce. But to this last point about younger folks coming through, my personal feeling, and this is let me reveal my own relationship with my own daughter. I think that we're in a transition here. We're right between the second Reconstruction and second Jim Crow.
Absolutely.
So my language to her is like, don't get it twisted. It's not going to be easy. Cats are coming for you. So you have to be ready. And a lot of these things that we've been doing for 15, 20 years, the argument and the case that we have of their success is limited. So when the partition now comes and people are like, well, we've been investing in this for 30 years. What do we really need? And then they start to unfold. We're going to go through it again. It's pendular, of course. But I think now the resilience that's necessary is absolutely critical. The positioning of being like profoundly excellent means more now than it has ever meant in our generation.
Absolutely.
And the tools, and I'm not one to relieve responsibility of institutions for beating up on people, but our resilience and the attitudes, and I think, Rachel, when we were talking about this before, the attitude of triumph, if you don't have it, you're in trouble. And I think that this is where we now have to indoctrinate people to be ready, to be versatile, to be on time, as it were.
I think we've proven, I think our young people have proven that they're resilient. I think that they've proven that they've proven over and over again, oftentimes way too much, or if have had to prove way too much, you know, how strong they are, right? I mean, you look at all the things that were happening, you know, with George Floyd, and you look at all these other brothers and sisters that are being killed, and, you know, you look at Breonna Taylor, and you look at all these things that are happening, and then we're still showing up to work. We're still trying to be excellent, right? And we're doing these things, and people aren't complaining. You know, they're not doing that, especially if they're not in a space where they feel that levity to do so, right? But the thing that I keep going back to for me is like, when are we not going to have this conversation no more? I was sitting on a panel the other day, and they asked me, something like, what would you like to see what would be an indicator of success for you in 5 years? And I was like, 5 years, shit, that ain't enough time. We got way longer than that to go. 5 years.
Yeah.
But what I would like to see is that we don't have to have these panels no more. Right? That's what I would like to see. But I'm going to keep going, Melinda, until you tell me to stop. So, because I think this is a really important conversation, and I'm so grateful to Melinda and Wayne. I think they do an amazing job with tech inclusion. That's why I'm one of their biggest fans. But the thing that I want to get to is we as folks, right? Our culture is almost deified, if you want to use that word, right? Every single place that you go, they're looking at us in a way that they glorify our culture. But at the same time that our culture is on this pedestal, we're the fucking pedestal. We're way down here. They don't even see us, right? We're just holding up this culture. When are we going to get to a point? And I do think that it's corporations' losses. I do think that it's tech industry's loss to not really allow for us to be us and allow for us to just, like you said, just take off that little thing that controls our speed and just let us take off. When are we going to get to that point? What do we have to do to get to that point?
I think as a collective, we have to take our power, right? So I think about and set yourself up in such a way. If I think about like my career and I always get asked by young Black women, like, you speak so, powerfully, like you keep it 100. I'm like, well, mama got money in the bank now, so she's not really concerned too much about how 100 I keep it, because I know I'm going to be okay. I know that I've built up enough skills to support myself. So I'm not owned by anyone in particular. Like, there's a freedom in that. And I think like young people, set yourselves up in this capitalistic society, because let's keep it 100, which is another power system where you can be at a higher level of power than we were, than our parents were, than our parents' parents were. And that is through financial freedom. That is through, I think the tech bag is available. So take care of your funds, take care of like all the things you need to take care of so that you can be free in the workplace to show up more and more how you want to and you need to. But we have to take it. It's not being offered to us, quite frankly. I think we just have to show up. And I started doing that. I told people that like, I'm still in spaces that are heavily white and heavily male. I see, even on Zoom, I'm the only most of my meetings all day long. I used to take count, be like, okay, nope, yep, that's the only woman this time. The only Black woman this time. And I love it now. Why? Because I know that my opinion and my voice and what I have to say is going to be so different than the 7 or 8 other people in that meeting. But I didn't know that early on in my career. That scared me early on in my career of being the only and having a different voice. Now I say lean into it. And I hope that our young people are leaning into it well in their 20s and not wait until they're 40 to do it.
I got to agree with that one. Like, I'm the same way, like over the last couple of years, just stepping into my bigness. Cause I admit like financial freedom does that limiter's off, like then you feel like you can't touch me. And then like you step into your bigness, like I have something to say. I can be really additive here. And like, because they for so long make you feel like if you say anything, you'll get chopped and you won't get to where you want to go. But it's nothing more liberating to be able to say what you feel when you want to say it, how you want to say it. It's one of the best feelings.
Mom, are you taking notes? What was you writing down over there?
I was addressing, you putting me on the spot, but I was addressing this cat that I got to talk to in a minute. But I wanted to put but so perhaps to summarize that sequence, I think the way that you posed it in the beginning, Lionel, was about when. And that kind of has historic references in our legacy so there, I think it's relevant to say that, the country is 244 years old. There was slavery for 246 years. We just got to school in integrated legal ways in 1954, which is essentially last Thursday. And so we don't really have, the fight time has not been that long relative to the conditions that have put us in this place in the first place. So I think the arc, as much as this is frustrating, the arc that we're on and the trajectory that we're on to step into our bigness, as it were, we're doing remarkably well, given that period. So I think, again, if we're talking now, particularly to young people, that's something to keep in mind. We're on an arc here. This country is a baby. It's a teenager relative to other countries. And so I think those messages that have been out there with Nicole Hannah-Jones, for example, and others, where Black people have taught this country how to be a country. We're the ones pushing it to be its best self. And I think that's kind of incumbent of all of us in our various capacities at our various stages, to take heed of that we're the best of what this place has to offer.
We've proven that over and over again,
repeatedly.
You look at every other country, and there's pieces and parts of us, right? And I'm talking about Black Americans. I'm not talking about just Black folks, but Black Americans. Our culture is expanded. What that brought up for me, and again, I can't thank y'all enough, really, because the hope here is that others will hear you, because I've heard you and I've learned so much from you, right? And I'm hoping that others will hear you. That's the thing. But when we talk about, so let's talk to, some of the Black executives that are out there. Let's talk to some of the Black senior level folks that are out there about how do they mentor? How do they sponsor? What are those things, and why are those things so important? And if somebody wants to talk about the difference there too, I'd really appreciate that.
Bernard, you're a Black exec.
I'm a Black exec. That's right.
All three of y'all.
I think we're all in the same spot. You know what? I think it's just like sharing. I think the most important thing is shared experiences and not feeling alone. Because the thing that Rachel kind of talked to, being the only in the room, can feel fairly isolating. I think the ability to create community and kind of sharing best practices and speed each other up. I found that to be dramatically important in terms of stepping in the tech and then understanding the lay of the land and which way to go and what not to do, creating that community and talking to other folks who kind of walk there before you. Because many of us haven't been here. We talked about, Kamau talked about we haven't been doing this for this long. I mean, 60 years to really get it. And so there isn't a handbook. So I think it's really sharing that and really reaching back and lifting as we climb. Like, this has been the most important thing to me. So that gives me perspective. It allows me to strategize better, allows me not to make mistakes. They didn't have to be made, but really creating that community and making sure that we truly help one another, as opposed to, I'm gonna get mine. And I think I've seen that mentality change. It's not I'm gonna get mine. I'm gonna help mine. And I would just love to see more of that.
Yeah. Agreed. Miss Rachel, you got something to say on that?
Not really. I mean, I just to add on or build is first of all, there are not that many Black executives, when you think about all industry, all corporations. And so building a collective outside of our corporations is probably going to be helpful. Talking in forums in this way is going to be helpful. I think about early in my career, when I left a company and left stock on the table, which meant when that company went public, because it did, I left millions of dollars on the table. I wish I had a Black executive to pull me aside and say, hey, little girl, don't, this company is going somewhere. You might want to hang in here. Let me help you navigate the political troubles you find yourself in and navigate, because ultimately this is about wealth, like, to give me that perspective. But there was no such person around, and I didn't have access even at an adjacent company that I even knew, so this community building is super, super important, even still now, to share to share, lift, pull, climb, as we all continue to climb.
The only thing that I wanted to add to that, and again, I'm so grateful for this conversation. I know that I phrased it as an executive, but I also want to say that you don't have to be an executive. You know, you can be a 2-year person sponsoring that 1-year person, right? You can, you know, we have to work together. You know, we have to work together. We have to help each other. We have to build each other up. And when people argue with me about that, you know, that why is it that, you know, you're talking about like black folks helping black folks? Well, haven't white folks been doing that for as long as we can think about? So now that I want to talk about it and I want to put it out there, then you're going to come at me differently? No, that's not the way that it works for me, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I would like to put out there. And again, I'm just so thankful for y'all and so thankful for so many others that are really, really invested in this work and that are really trying to make and affect some serious change. And to be respectful of their time, I do think that we got to get going too. There's Wayne, so I know we got to get going.
Wayne's like, look.
There's Wayne. So in closing,
Sandman is here.
Wayne, we're gonna get off. I'm sorry, Wayne. In closing, one last piece of, you know, just some love out there, just some, you know, seriousness out there, just one last piece, and we'll start with Miss Rachel.
What do you mean, one last piece?
Just one last piece. You saw Wayne. We got to go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have anything to add. I would just say I am deeply passionate about lifting, pulling folks up. So hit me up on LinkedIn, hit me up on Twitter, wherever you can find me out on the universe. I'll spend some time talking to you, sharing with you, and helping you to navigate these waters. It's not easy.
Mr. Bernard.
Yeah, same, echoing Rachel, like, you know, I want to be additive. I want to be helpful. I want to see you win. So reach out to me. I'll do what I can. Limited bandwidth, but I'll do what I can. So I have to manage expectations.
Good point. I didn't say that. Yeah.
And Mr. Kamau.
I think it's all the same. Be excellent, triumphant, and vote.
And vote.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you. And I want to encourage others out there to speak up. I want to encourage our young folks to take pride in who they are, what they've been through, the resiliency, the strength. And, you know, just be as true to you as you possibly can. You know, and again, I am so appreciative. I can't wait to see y'all and go have a drink for real. I know you don't drink, Bernard.
I do.
I know you do. We're gonna get together one day, very, very soon. Very, very soon. I'm so grateful. I learned so much every single time I sit with you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tech Inclusion. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Melinda. And I think we're out.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
everybody.
Bye.
All right, y'all. Take care.